A prenuptial agreement, or often called a prenup, is a contract that a couple may enter into prior to getting married. It will define the rights of parties, be it from how we want to define and ultimately allocate assets or liabilities, and can even address things such as alimony and the payment of attorney's fees in the event of a divorce. A prenuptial agreement is incredibly important because it may minimize certain things that are litigated at the time of an actual divorce proceeding. Prenuptial agreements are absolutely not only intended for wealthy individuals. Many of my clients come to me seeking a prenuptial agreement when they've entered into a second marriage, or they want to protect certain assets such as premarital assets, inheritance, family business. Really anything that somebody wants to protect can be covered in a prenuptial agreement provided it's of a financial nature. People often will enter into prenuptial agreements because they want to know what their rights are going to be prior to getting married, and ultimately what could happen in the event of a divorce. A postnuptial agreement is very similar to a prenuptial agreement. However, in that case, the parties are married and they want to enter into contractual obligations after the marriage. Ultimately, it's the same terms and provisions that can be included in a prenuptial agreement, anything from alimony and division of assets and allocation of liabilities. And it often happens that people want to enter into postnuptial agreements because certain things have happened during the marriage that require some type of a contract to be entered into. The conversation about prenuptial agreements can be a very hard conversation. What often happens is that people think, my spouse doesn't trust me. They are already planning for a divorce in the future. That's actually not what's happening. A lot of times people want to come into a marriage knowing what certain assets are going to be protected. They also want to understand, in the event of a divorce, what can I do to protect myself? Ultimately, down the road, if a divorce is inevitable, a prenuptial agreement can actually help parties by defining their rights and obligations before a divorce occurs. The conversation about having a prenuptial agreement can be a tricky one. Ultimately, people should understand that they should be approaching the issue with their future spouse in a way that's kind and compassionate. Generally, what I tell my clients is that you need to treat a prenuptial agreement as insurance. Ultimately, you want to make sure that down the road, certain assets and liabilities are accounted for. It's a very important conversation for people to have with one another, which doesn't mean it's necessarily easy, but something that has to be addressed. Prenuptial agreements are never going to include anything related to children. So you should expect that when entering into a prenuptial agreement, there's going to be areas that are left open to interpretation in the event of a divorce. For example, a prenuptial agreement will not set forth terms for decision-making or parenting time. It's not going to set forth terms regarding child support. This would be contrary to public policy. Therefore, be knowledgeable of what a prenuptial agreement can cover and understand its limitations. When considering a prenup, I think it's really important to discuss what your common goals are. Now, goals are not always going to be the same, but if parties want to both protect assets and determine rights and obligations pursuant to the divorce, that should be discussed between parties. If parties have a family business or inheritance or other issues that they need to have covered in the prenup, it's very important to define those goals so that people understand what they're getting into. So if parties want to modify their prenuptial agreement, what they're going to do is they're going to amend it, and they're going to attach that amendment to the actual prenuptial agreement that's already been executed prior to their marriage. It's very important to have an attorney review those changes with each party, make sure that each party has a clear and fundamental understanding of what types of changes have been implemented. And those changes should be signed by each party so that they are effective upon the date of signature. As much as prenuptial agreements have become more popular and more common these days, I still get a lot of questions from people who want to know, what happens if I move? Ultimately, will the prenuptial agreement still stand up in the state that I'm now living? It's important to go over with your attorney certain things such as choice of law, but be assured that a prenuptial agreement will still be valid provided it's comported with all of the laws of the state in which it's been executed.